So as we transition from our Civil War and Reconstruction unit, you'll see that the name of this unit is Industrialization. And the concept of industrialization will manifest itself not only in the east coast of the United States, on the far west coast, but it's going to creep in between to the Midwest and the Great Plains as well. Now, the first big topic that we're going to cover is that of relations between natives and the federal government on the plains. Now, it says Sioux resistance, and, the Sioux were hunters who had mostly trapped beaver and sold them for pelts. But just like with the other fur trappers and traders, they found that overhunting had led them to shift their focus to buffalo hunting. Now, the Sioux had mastered the horse, which made them much more efficient at buffalo hunting. And in addition to food, buffalo robes, meat, and tongues, that made for good trading items, they were able to broker these deals with white partners. Now, the Sioux were also fierce warriors, and they forced all of their opponents to either submit or be annihilated. The Sioux population was also increasing because they had acquired a smallpox vaccine from one of their trading partners. So there were about 25,000 Sioux in the 1850s. Recognizing their power, the U.S. government called a peace conference at Fort Laramie in 1851. Now, a total of 10,000 Native Americans attended, but the Sioux were the only ones that held any sway. And their accounts indicate that the efforts of the federal government to get them to stay north of established wagon trails failed. Now, the Great Sioux Uprising in late summer 1862 highlighted the abuse that the Dakota Sioux suffered following their removal to a reservation in 1858. And sometimes the Dakota Sioux were referred to as the Santee. The federal government had hoped that they would take up settled agriculture, and they would provide food to the Sioux in the interim. The failure to do so highlighted the issues surrounding the two agencies that were tasked with dealing with Native American affairs. You have the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the U.S. Army. Now, the BIA reported to Congress and was responsible for helping Native Americans on the plains with things like clothing, food, and education. The department itself became very corrupt, and this led to the understandable provocation of many tribes. The Army was responsible for rounding up Native Americans, relocating them, and keeping them on reservations. So this is all bound to cause resentment. Now, when we talk of the Great Sioux Uprising, 200 starving Sioux attacked farms in Minnesota and killed more than 350 men, women, and children. Preoccupied by the Civil War, Lincoln didn't devote much time or attention to the issue, and instead, he sent a detachment of Union troops to take care of it. Lincoln actually commuted the death sentences of 260 Santee, but 38 were hanged in the largest mass hanging in American history. Now, the federal government did use this uprising as an excuse to remove all natives from Minnesota and place them on a reservation in South Dakota. The man you see here, Wisconsin soldier Chauncey Cook, joined the 25th Wisconsin Infantry at age 16, presumably to fight the Civil War and free the slaves. But his first assignment was to guard a contingent of Santee in Minneapolis, and few of them had actually participated in this uprising. Cook was very sympathetic to the Dakota, but few white Americans at this time shared in his sympathies. Now, Colorado is the site of the next clash between white settlers and Native Americans, and it all has to do with gold. Gold is discovered in 1858, and even though not as many ventured to Colorado as did to California, it was alarming enough to the Cheyenne and the Arapaho. Colorado received a territorial government in 1861, and the governor placed Colonel John Chivington in charge of the territorial militia. Chivington responded with hostility when he heard that a peace delegation of Cheyenne and Arapaho had been received at the White House. In November 1864, Chivington led his men in a preemptive strike against a camp of the two tribes that was near Sand Creek in eastern Colorado. Most of the men in this contingent were away hunting. So most of those killed were women, children, and the elderly. And accounts range from 50 to 700. Nobody knows exactly how many. The soldiers knew exactly what they were doing. And part of the unfortunate evidence of this is the fact that a 6-year-old girl was holding up a white flag, approaching troops. She was looking to surrender, and she was shot. Now, the event was initially reported as a great victory, but as eyewitness accounts began to trickle in, it was abundantly clear that this is not what had taken place. 2 military investigations and 1 congressional committee resulted in this being labeled as a massacre. But no action was taken to discipline any parties involved, mainly because Chivington had already resigned his post. So there was no military tribunal that was formed to hold him accountable. Sand Creek disrupted the traditional power structure of the Cheyenne and Arapaho, and they allied with the powerful Sioux Nation to retaliate. The Sioux war chief, Red Cloud, is the leader of this alliance, and this alliance attacked settlements, cut telegraph wires, and shut down the road to Denver. His young lieutenant, Crazy Horse, suggested that instead of just ambushing construction crews, which wound up only having a minimal effect, they should instead lure Army troops into ambushes. This proved to be very effective, so the alliance frustrated the Army to the point that General William Tecumseh Sherman instructed General Philip Sheridan, and this is the same Sheridan who served with Grant at the end of the Civil War, he instructed him to do anything necessary to enforce government policy. So Sheridan responded with the same ruthlessness with which he approached the Civil War. Now, Red Cloud understood Sherman's threat of annihilation, and he knew that he could carry it out. So Red Cloud accepted Sherman's offer of a reservation with the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868. So we're looking 17 years after that first Fort Laramie Conference, a treaty is signed where at least Red Cloud accepts the reservation offer, but not all of the Sioux are going to agree with him.